Welcome along to another episode of the Play On Podcast, your weekly instalment of all things Scottish football. I'm David Simmons. As always, I'm delighted to be joined by Anthony Brown and Stephen Commons. Stay tuned for the next hour as we look back on this weekend's Scottish football in action. On tonight's show, we're asking the question, as Celtic land in Dubai, is the league title en route to Ibrox? As it certainly looks that way, and that's what we're about to discuss. We want to hear from you guys, though. We're fully live and interactive for the next 60 minutes, so if you want to drop us a message, it'd be very much appreciated. Don't forget, if you're watching via YouTube, subscribe to the State of Mind YouTube page. I'm having a nightmare in 2021 already. Subscribe to the State of Mind YouTube page. It'd be much appreciated. So yeah, guys, did you all have a good Christmas and New Year? Welcome back.
Yeah, pretty decent, thanks. It was very low key, same as everyone else, I would imagine. But yeah, it was all right.
Anthony, yourself, you have a good one, mate?
It was very good, thank you. I scudded my knuckles sledging the other day though, so apart from that, it's been alright.
These things happen, mate. So, right, let's get the show off and running. The new one for 2021, we've got to start at Ibrox. It finished Rangers 1, Celtic 0. Stephen, we'll start with yourself, mate. Is that the league title decided now as it's on its way to Ibrox?
Yeah, I don't think you can kind of argue any other way. I think you would have to be the most rose-tinted Celtic fan to even kind of think that realistically they've got a chance of pulling that back now. It was just a must-win or at the very worst not lose game for Celtic, and unfortunately, despite having the majority of the play in the game and probably being the better team for vast majority of it, it seems like the factors that kind of dictate where the points go just always seem to kind of go against them at the big moments at this moment in time. And it was, to be honest, it was one of these games that you'll probably look back on and think that just shows you how good Rangers actually are and were this season, because they can go into games like this. They did the same against Hibs. They don't necessarily play very well in the game, but they just do exactly what they need to do: get the 3 points, get up the road, and that 19 points clear now. I just can't see. It would be like unthinkable for them to throw that away now.
Yeah, I mean, it was a game of two McGregors, if you like. It was an own goal by Callum McGregor that basically put Rangers ahead. But they say that goals win you games. I mean, without a doubt, the goalkeeper, Alan McGregor for Rangers, had a big part to play in that win on Saturday. Anthony, did he not?
Yeah, it was a big save, the one in the first half where he's tipped it wide, and obviously Celtic were well on top at that point. If that goal goes in, it probably ends up a completely different game, or there's a good chance it becomes a different game. You couldn't say for certain that Celtic would have went on to win it, because they've got a recent record of getting themselves in good positions in games and then making heavy weather of it in the second half. But certainly if that goal goes in, then there's a far better chance of Celtic coming away with 3 points, and suddenly it probably wouldn't have altered the title race too dramatically, but it certainly keeps it alive if Celtic were able to come away with a result. But that save obviously was a pivotal moment in the game. Rangers then go and grind out the victory after the red card, and now the title is theirs still. Well, it's not even theirs to throw away. It's basically theirs at the moment. I can't see any way that they're not going to win the title this year.
I mean, that was a huge changing point in the game, Beaton's red card. There's been a bit, I mean, Neil Lennon's come out and said it wasn't, it was going to be covered. Stephen, you're shaking your head. I take it you think it was a straight red?
Absolutely. Just deflection tactics massively for Neil Lennon. But, I mean, it was an absolute stonewaller of a red card. Like, I just don't... Morelos was so quiet during that game. He was coming deeper and deeper and just dropping just to get touches of the ball and try and get involved with the play. And that one moment where Tavernier's just put a very simple ball down the channel and he spun him, and it's such a red card that I cannot believe a guy of Neil Lennon's integrity has come out after the game to try and blame that on Bobby Madden. I mean, it's laughable, to be honest. It's ridiculous. At the end of the day, he should have just came out and said, "Listen, we were the better team. We've been beaten in the game." But to try and blame it completely on the referee was a bit of a joke, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, because Celtic were looking okay up until that point. Frimpong was getting a lot of joy down the right-hand side. I mean, there were shots getting put away. McGregor had a couple of good saves, like we've said, Anthony. Do you agree with Stephen? Was it a red card?
Yeah, it was a red card. I mean, I have to admit, when I first saw it, I just assumed it was a second booking at first. I wasn't really expecting the red instantly. I didn't think he's definitely a last man, but then when you see the replays, he is pretty blatantly a last man. And then you analyse, is he stopping a goal scoring opportunity? Because at first glance, you maybe think it's quite wide a goal, but then the way the ball's running, it looks like if Morelos gets away, he has got a clean run and he's going to be homing in on goal. So I think as much as I wouldn't have, my gut instinct wasn't that's a red card. I think when you watch the replays, it's pretty obviously a red card.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would say it was a red card as well. Morelos, though, but he was maybe quite lucky to stay on. There's obviously been a bit of media coverage about Bobby Madden restraining Morelos from kicking off. Do you think that fracas that kicked off between him and Scott Brown, as we normally see in these kind of matches, do you think that he maybe wanted a red card if Madden hadn't stepped in, Stephen?
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones again. Like we talked about the Hearts Celtic Cup final and how it was nice to see just two teams going at it and kind of going toe to toe, and I just think that's the kind of player Morelos is. And for me, Scott Brown was put on for that exact reason. He was put on to try and even things up and get one of them to go as well. And I just think, Morelos is silly in a way. Like he has chucked a jab at Scott Brown in that sort of melee, but it's just one of those ones that there's coming together. How many times has Scott Brown done that in his career all the way through? I don't think he can. I don't think that would have changed the game, to be perfectly honest. If he had gone at that point, I still think Rangers would have had it in them to kind of see the game out. It's one of those ones where he could have went, but equally, I think Shane Duffy was very lucky to stay on the park with his challenge as well. So he's gone right over the top of the ball and just I think Bobby Madden actually had quite a good game, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think he lost control of that match at all, and I was a big fan of his response to that. So a lot of people had kind of publicly slated him for holding Morelos during that sort of melee and saying, "Oh, here we go, you can see whose side he's on in this one," and he responded by uploading like 7 photos from his whole refereeing career of him holding back Hamilton players and Kilmarnock players and Hibs players. So good on him. I think it's quite refreshing to see a referee just sort of come out and sort of say, "Nah, listen, pipe down a wee bit, wee man." It's nice because for years and years they've been these sort of faceless guys that never get to respond to anything. So good on Bobby Madden for doing that.
No, I agree. I did see that tweet that he came out on social media and did. I mean, he's clearly done it, not just to Alfredo Morelos, to other players as well. So no, fair play to him. Hi to Ian McIntosh. He's put typical Lennon to blame the ref. Like you said, Stephen, he's just playing a deflector card possibly to take the heat away from him, possibly. Another bad decision maybe Neil Lennon's made, and I don't know if it's his decision or not, but as we all know in the press, on social media, he's taken the first team away to Dubai now for a few days. Anthony, is that a bad decision on his behalf to still take the players away?
To still take the players away, yes. I think at the time of booking it, you could almost understand it because I don't know specifically when they booked it, but it was certainly a few months ago when the situation wasn't quite as serious as it is just now in terms of the COVID. But I think it's been pretty apparent for certainly the last month that we're in a pretty grim predicament, and I just think there's an element of Celtic not reading the room here. They really, whether they're allowed to go or not, it doesn't look great. I mean, to be honest with you, when I first saw the images last night of the players out drinking, my initial reaction was one of shock because I just didn't expect to see that at this moment. I just genuinely thought that they would go away, get a bit of stick, come back, and that would be it. And I wasn't braced for seeing this, so I was quite shocked when I first saw them with a drink in their hand. But what I would say is, on reflection, I don't have any issue with them having a drink on arrival, whether they're 19 points clear at the top of the league or 19 points off the pace. I could not care less whether they're having a day chilling out, drinking beer. It's the fact they've actually gone to Dubai mid-pandemic that I think is the issue here. And they're probably two separate issues, but they've been contorted into one. And it looks much worse now because they've obviously been pictured drinking and recorded on video phones and what have you, which they no doubt will have hoped to have avoided that side of it. And presumably were told not to go on social media and post anything about drinking or whatever. I mean, I dare say they were probably only having a few quiet beers, but it doesn't look good now that it's made its way back to the UK, the perils of camera phones, social media and all that. But the fundamental point here is Celtic should not have gone to Dubai mid-pandemic. It's not as a PR disaster for them, and it just smacks of negligence on several levels that they've actually gone ahead with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you can see on the...
How many times have we seen, like, in the years go by, whether it be down south or up here, that on the back of a terrible, terrible result at Christmas time, the manager will come out and publicly say, right, that's it, Christmas night out's cancelled for the team, like the boys are meant to be going to Newcastle or whatever, and then on the Saturday they play terribly, there's a poor result, Christmas night out gets canned. And I understand the finance involved is a whole different level, but for a club of Celtic size, I think they would have done themselves a tiny bit of a favour, especially in the eyes of their own supporters, by sort of saying, listen guys, we, as Tony quite rightly said, you need to read the room. You need to look at what's going on in the world and look at what's going on in Scottish football, and especially in their own, the things that they are responsible for. They're 19 points behind their biggest rivals. They've just lost an Old Firm game, and the First Minister of our country has just come out today and basically told everyone they're not allowed to leave their houses. Whose idea was it to still allow these players to fly out of the country 2 days ago? I mean, it's absolutely just ridiculous. It's an absolutely ridiculous decision. And I'm not saying that Celtic would have lost a lot of money and they probably wouldn't have been patted on the back the way that they maybe deserved to be if they had canned this trip. But I think in the eyes of the Celtic fans, like, I'm looking at it from my own point of view. Like, I've invested a lot of my money in buying a season ticket for Hearts, and if I saw that some of like obviously the contributions that I make towards the club had gone to them flying out to Dubai on the back of a bad result, and on the back of being 19 points like behind our biggest rivals, and saw that my hard-earned money that I'd invested in the club had contributed towards them going and getting a few beers in Dubai. It's just ridiculous. Read the room. It's very, very poor PR, very poor management.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see on the screen there, John Sanderson agrees. Shocking PR for the club going to Dubai. No, I agree, but there is some mixed messages because we've got Daft Gav that's coming as well. He's put a message up which is saying, I don't mind the players relaxing. Dubai's worked for us before. Why not again? And there was images of the players obviously doing training today, but I can see your point, Stephen. It would be interesting to see Celtic fans' point. If you've invested your money in season tickets or buying strips, investing in your club, do you agree that maybe sending the players to Dubai at this time of the year, like you say, with what's happening in the world, was it a good idea? Let us know. We're interactive for the remainder of the show. Anthony, I mean, let's have a wee think about the game again. If we look back to the own goal, okay, let's have a look at this, because for people that don't know me personally, I'm a goalkeeping coach as well. I don't profess being a great goalkeeping coach or even was a great goalkeeper, but I've never been a great fan of Barkas since he's come in at Celtic. I don't think he's the sort of goalkeeper that teams like Celtic should be signing for 4.5 million anyway. If you look at the goal he conceded, from a goalkeeping point of view, he has no players on the post, which then means that when the ball comes in, he takes 2 steps to his left to cover that area. Now, for me, I would have a player on each post. Anthony,
can I ask a question, a technical question about this? So, obviously, back in the day when we all played football and we were going to watch football, it would always be a goalkeeper that would dictate that. He would say, I want one on the front post and you mark it. Like, is that dictated to, at this sort of level we're talking about now, is that dictated to by the manager and the coaching staff now, or does he still get the shout on that? So will he still decide if he wants players on the post or not?
Well, I think it's going to be around your circumstances, because obviously, I mean, at that point, Beaton was off, wasn't he? Yeah, so right away you're a defender down. So whatever area he was picking up on, there might well have been a plan in training to have a goalkeeper, defender on one of the posts. But to have no one on that post, when you look, and also I know it took a bad deflection, but he needs to be getting across his goal to make a dive. He seems to just floating there, if that makes sense.
Exactly. It looked like he dived, but he didn't move. Like his leg, it's like he kicked his legs out one way, but he didn't actually spring across the goals. Like it's like he dived without moving. It was a bizarre, but I don't think that you look at that goal and automatically say that's a goalkeeping error. Like I don't agree with that, but I just again though, if you have somebody on the back post, if you have a player on the back post, then that gets cleared off the line. That is just cleared right off the line. If somebody at the front post, he doesn't have to take the 2 steps to the left and then do a dive, which doesn't see him go across the goal. I've never been impressed with Barkas, so I'd be interested to see any Celtic fans' opinion on that, especially when there was rumours that they could have had David Marshall on a Bosman as well. I seen that online the other day, that Marshall could have came in on a Bosman. They let Craig Gordon go.
we've talked about this many a time on the show before. Craig Gordon could still be doing a job. Alan McGregor's shown that he's doing it at Rangers at that age. Am I right in saying, Anthony, are they around about the same age, Gordon and McGregor?
Yeah, McGregor's 38. I think Gordon's 37. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much accepted that Celtic would have been better off if they'd kept Craig Gordon. But they've made the decision. I mean, it's easy to say now that Barkas is a flop and all that. It's not worked out. There was obviously something that Celtic saw in him that they thought he was worth paying £4.5 million for. I mean, signings don't work out. It happens. It's a normal part of football that teams pay a lot of money and the signing doesn't always work. I mean, it's every single club's had this situation. It's just obviously exacerbated when you spend a lot of money on a goalkeeper and he turns out to be inferior to the ones that you had last season. So, I mean, it's easy to blame the scouting team. It's easy to blame the manager himself. But I mean, I never saw Barkas play in Greece, so I don't know quite how good he was. But he obviously was a high caliber goalkeeper in his homeland. If teams abroad were willing to pay almost £4.5 million. But I think it's safe to say they need reinforcements in that department, unless they do decide to go back to Hazard at some point. But I mean, even then, for all that we were raving about Hazard after the cup final penalty shootout, he's certainly not proven by any stretch. So I think it's fair to say Celtic need a goalkeeper, or they need Barkas probably to come good, which at the moment doesn't look like it's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything.
I don't know what Barkas is good at. I don't know what, he's not big and imposing. He's not physically commanding his area. He doesn't come out and take crosses. He's not agile or athletic. I don't know what he's good at. I've not seen. I don't think I've seen him make a save. In the games that I've watched, I've not seen him make even a reasonably straightforward save.
He pinged a couple of nice passes up to Edward, so obviously on the distribution side he looks okay, but
maybe they should play him at centre half.
Yeah, possibly. Well, Alex thinks his positioning was rubbish, so that's on the screen there at the moment. Hi to Sean as well. He's put that Frimpong picking up Aribo, that's your problem straight away. I mean, the smallest guy on the park, there you go. But then again, that might be because Beaton, that was maybe meant to be Beaton's man, and it's something that maybe not addressed. But I mean, that's a very valid point there, isn't it? Putting the smallest man on the park with a big guy like Aribo.
Yeah, it's schoolboy stuff. It's absolutely, as you quite rightly pointed out, having a man on the post, having people picked up properly is absolute just basic stuff. And don't get me wrong, Celtic weren't doing that all the way through the game, because I thought they looked pretty solid. They looked pretty well set up most of the match, and Rangers barely laid a glove on them. Rangers won 1-0 without having a shot on goal. It just kind of sums up the situation that Celtic are kind of facing at the moment.
Well, that's it. I mean, we've seen them in the second half as well against Hearts in the final. They kind of, when things don't go Celtic's way, if they go a goal down or if they concede a goal back, they tend just to fall away. Would you agree with that, Anthony? Is that probably, they just don't have that sort of maybe fighting spirit that Rangers do to give them, I feel like, a kick up the arse to go on and actually dominate and win a game?
I think as soon as Beaton got sent off, my gut reaction was that's Celtic's chance of winning this game gone. Whereas in the past, Celtic losing a player wouldn't automatically mean that they'd lost the chance of victory. In some ways, Celtic of a few years ago, certainly under Rodgers, when they lost a player, they would tend to get a bit of resilience about them, and they could still. I mean, we saw at Ibrox a couple of years ago where they won with 10 men. I think it was the 3-2 game. But I just never felt, as soon as Beaton goes off, you think the best they can hope for is holding out for a 0-0 here. As soon as the goal goes in, you're thinking they ain't coming back from this. And they had, I think, was it Rogic had the shot at the end, but they didn't really, or was it El Yunusi, one of them, the volley over the top.
El Yunusi, yeah.
Over the top,
and they never really looked like getting back into it, to be honest. You never felt they're going to have a rally and properly put Rangers under pressure here. I think they won a corner right at the end, but you never really felt like they were going to get back in the game, which, having watched Scottish football for the last 20, 30 years, I mean, you're always expecting Celtic to have a big, strong push regardless of circumstances, but the way things are just now with Rangers and with Celtic, you just felt as soon as that goal went in, it was game over.
I just think that's what happens when you have a guy like Neil Lennon in charge of your team. People can kind of say the positives and negatives in Lennon as a manager, but I think it's pretty well established that he's not a master tactician. He's a guy who gets the best out of his group. He's more of a man manager and a motivator than somebody who's a tactical genius. So see, these types of managers are shown up for what they really are, when situations like that occur. So when you go down to 10 men, what you really need isn't a guy who's going to rattle cages and get boys flying through brick walls. You need a guy who's going to be able to, at a very, very short period of time, come up with some sort of a plan, make substitutions if they're needed, and get these guys into a system and into a shape which is still going to give them a chance to win the game. And I think that's what Brendan Rodgers was brilliant at. Like I think he was so well organised and so well planned that he had probably thought through every single eventuality of who could get sent off. And I just don't think Neil Lennon is that type of manager.
You got the feeling it was almost they were acting on sort of instinct on the hoof, when obviously you can't plan for every eventuality, but you did get the feeling they were scratching their head a wee bit, thinking, who do we take off here? And obviously Griffiths came off, and you can see the logic in that to an extent, but equally in a derby, Griffiths is probably, the way Edouard's playing at the moment, Griffiths is probably your best bet of nicking a goal, even though he wasn't necessarily in the game as much as he would have liked. I'd still
me, it would have made a lot more sense for them to take off Sorrow, because Sorrow was already on a booking. He was kind of like the spare man in midfield, and it might mean that you're going to get overrun. But all you would need to do at that point is just tell the wingers you're just going to have to tuck. You're going to have to tuck and be more of a solid shape in the middle. Keep the two up top, because losing that game 1-0, even drawing that game was no really any good to Celtic.
They had to win.
They had to just go for it. And it's all very well and good in hindsight saying, right, well, they should have done this or they should have done that. But if you take off Sorrow, who, again, as I say, he got taken off 10, 15 minutes later anyway, because he was on a booking and they were worried about that. You take him off and sacrifice him as the sort of to get the shape back, I think you would have stood a much better chance. I mean, it's all ifs and buts. Rangers could have then went on and been a lot more comfortable in the game, but at least you would have given yourself a bit more of a chance. Like, they kind of went down with a whimper, to be perfectly honest.
No, that's it. I mean, now that they're away to Dubai, obviously it's sparked all this controversy. There's loads of comments coming in. Do keep them coming. Any of the clean ones I will put up on the screen, so keep them clean, and we'll discuss it as the show goes through. But this trip to Dubai, it must put a lot of pressure now on Neil Lennon now returning, because they've got to kind of prove that, well, it was worthwhile going to Dubai, giving the players this rest and training them under this hot climate. They travel to Easter Road, I think it is, on Monday night, or it's at Celtic Park, I'm not sure, but regardless, Easter Road, they play Hibs. Regardless, he needs to get a huge victory against them on Monday night now, doesn't he, after taking them away?
By the way, Hibs will be absolutely bang up for this, because not only the fact that they've had a couple of bad results on the spin, they had no say in this. Remember, this was the whole situation where Leanne Dempster, before she resigned, was basically apologising to the Hibs fans, saying, we knew nothing about this. Celtic put the application in, we said no, and then obviously it goes to an arbitrator, and the standard rules are home team dictates. So Celtic pushed this game back so that they could get, because there's no winter break, they pushed this game back so they could get this trip. That was the whole point. So Hibs, if you're Jack Ross, you should have been building up for the last couple of weeks saying, let's go and show them. Let's go and show, like, who do they think they are? I think they can just dictate to us when we play. So they're going to be absolutely bang up for it. So Lennon, I think he is under massive pressure. I mean, I know that maybe sounds ridiculous to say, because he's been under pressure for months now. But given this decision, which potentially, I don't think this would have been Neil Lennon's decision, but this decision, along with many others that he has made, has put the whole club under the microscope even more than they were before. No,
I agree. It should be fun to see how that game pans out next Monday.
Okay, so at Celtic Park. Sorry, I was thinking it was Easter Road, but they played at Easter Road recently.
They've already played Easter Road.
Perfect. Moving on to another derby, the Lanarkshire derby. Hamilton 3, Motherwell 0. So this was quite an interesting game, and we'll talk about goalkeepers in this as well. In fact, there might be a goalkeeping theme all the way through tonight's show, but that's now no wins in 10 for the Fir Park side. Keith Lasley was in charge for the Steelmen as Stephen Robinson resigned. Who do you guys think would be a good manager to come in and take over the hot seat at Fir Park?
Tommy Wright. No-brainer for me. I mean, he's the standout in terms of candidates we sort of know about that are out there. He's the only show in town, I would suggest, and I can understand why some Motherwell fans are sceptical, because he probably got a reputation of playing agricultural football at St Johnstone. But I think if you go back to Tommy Wright at the start of when he went into St Johnstone, there was a real sort of optimism around the place. He's highly regarded by the supporters. I know, obviously, as time went on, some supporters started to get a bit fed up with his management, but Motherwell are in a predicament at the minute. They're down near the bottom of the league. I don't know, in my lifetime, I can't recall them ever being out of the Premiership. and they're in a position now where they could drop out of the Premiership. I think they need a safe pair of hands here. Motherwell have done really well in terms of taking gambles over the years. Most of them have paid off. They've gone with relatively untried managers or sort of left field appointments, and generally they've paid off. Most of them have worked. But I don't know, as much as you trust them to appoint a good manager, I don't know if they can afford to take too many risks here because of the position they're in. And especially when a guy like Tommy Wright is sitting there out of work and would probably jump at the chance of this job, I think it's an absolute no-brainer to give him I know Lasley's a popular guy at Motherwell and they maybe want to give him that chance, but ultimately he's a rookie and he'd be going into a relegation battle. I think Tommy Wright is, without a shadow of a doubt, the outstanding candidate here.
Yeah,
I don't think you can't obviously can't judge a guy his managerial ability on one game, but you would think that if you're the caretaker and this Mr. like Keith Lasley's Mr. Motherwell, he's been there, done it. If you're not going to respect him as a Motherwell man, you're not going to respect anybody. So if the level of the performance that they put in against their local rivals on Saturday suggests to me that if I was Alan Burrows or anybody else on that Motherwell board, I'd be looking at that and just scoring his name. As soon as that second goal went in, his name would be scored off the list and saying, right, let's see who else we can get. But I agree with Tony. I think Tommy Wright is by far the best candidate that I've seen suggested so far. And if you look at what he did with St Johnstone, you could argue that obviously Motherwell are a much bigger club than St Johnstone in terms of Scottish football, and I think they would be able to give him a better level of finance to be able to go and find these gems that he managed to get at St Johnstone quite regularly. So for me, I think it's a no-brainer.
Oh, there we go. I'm smirking here in the background. There's a few comments coming in saying give it to Neil Lennon, give it to Gavin Strachan, etc. So yeah, I mean that kind of shows what we've just been talking about. I think I'm right in saying that Maurice Ross was the other one that was in. Is he sort of assisting Keith Lasley at the moment?
Yeah,
so you wouldn't give it.
Coach.
So you wouldn't give it to any of those two, no?
No.
No,
it's not. They're both. Morris is a really intelligent, forward-thinking guy. I wouldn't have any qualms with him getting the Motherwell job per se. It's just the fact that they're in a relegation battle. I think that changes the dynamic a wee bit. If they were in mid-table and Stephen Robinson walks away, then by all means take a punt on somebody like Lasley or Maurice Ross. I just think when you're a club like Motherwell, who are an established Premiership club, and you find yourself joint bottom of the league, you can't really go taking any risks, to be honest. I mean, I know every manager's a risk. Hibs hired Terry Butcher thinking he was a safe bet and he took them down. So there's no guarantees that Tommy Wright wouldn't take Motherwell down. But I think you know that there's a fairly decent chance that Tommy Wright is going to get Motherwell, at least in the short term, moving in the right direction, get them back up to sort of mid-table, pushing for top six, where they would generally expect to be.
Yeah, so they got defeated 3-0 at New Douglas Park by their local rivals Hamilton. But on watching the game back, I mean, a lot of blame has to fall on the young goalkeeper. Aaron Chapman was his name. He had a bit of a shocker. He got beat at his near post for the first goal. He's flapped at a few crosses. He's been caught in no man's land. The second, he should be doing much better as well. Gets fired in at him and he doesn't even make an attempt with the legs. Stephen, we talked about this before off air. You've seen the goals he conceded as well. Would you agree that maybe they need to strengthen in that position at Motherwell?
Yeah, absolutely. They would have been better off with Charlie Chaplin in goals by the looks of things, mate, because he was the first two goals were like the comments I was seeing on Twitter were like, "This has surely got to be match fixing." That's how bad the attempts at saving these goals were. It's but I mean, Motherwell have been quite unlucky with keepers. They obviously had Trevor Carson's been pretty unlucky with injuries and illnesses over the last couple of years. They had Mark Gillespie, who they kind of found from nowhere, and the only reason they lost him in the summer was he got a move to Newcastle, believe it or not, like as their third choice goalie. So they were quite unlucky. They brought in Jordan Archer, who was at Spurs and Millwall, and like an experienced guy. But I don't know what the situation is with him. Like he's been brought in. I think he's maybe had a couple of errors here or there. They're just obviously trying to mix it up and bring in maybe younger guys and give some people a chance just to try and maybe kickstart what should be a good group of players, to try and sort of say to them, well, if you're not producing, we'll take you out and we'll put a young guy in. But that young lad, unfortunately, did not do himself any any favours with his display on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it was unfortunate for the guy. I do feel for him. Goalies Union and all that stuff. Moving on to the game at Easter Road, it finished Hibs 0, Livingston 3. Josh Mullins in 9 minutes, Guthrie in the 16th, and a second half goal from Scott Robinson completed a well-deserved 3 points for the Livingston lads. So that's 5 wins and 5 now for David Martindale since taking over full time at Livingston. You have to take your hats off to him, don't you? I mean, we kind of
7 in a row, mate. If you
7 in a row.
7 in a row. I'm telling you, he'll be the next Celtic manager at this chance. At this point.
Anthony, what a managerial move up the ladder, if you like, for him that's been, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think anybody expected it to go quite as well as it has for him. I mean, we spoke about him a few weeks ago about whether he was the right man for the job, whether he deserved the job, and I think we all agreed he probably was entitled to a crack at it, and he's certainly endorsing his credentials in terms of the way he's gone about the first month or so in the job. I mean, I don't think anybody would have envisaged Livingston being the team to emerge and sort of put any pressure on the top four. I mean, they're obviously still quite a bit behind Hibs, but they've got a couple of games in hand. And if Hibs were to continue floundering and Livingston were to maintain this form, that's 2 big ifs. Then Livingston are the team that look like they could emerge and start putting pressure on the teams in the top 4. Certainly Hibs and Aberdeen. I mean, Aberdeen look like they're going to pull away and go for 3rd. But if anybody is to come and knock Hibs out of 4th place, then Livingston are that team right now. And I don't think anybody could have envisaged that a month ago.
No, exactly. I mean, Jack Ross might have to start taking some some tips from Martindale. Stephen, would you agree? He's struggling a wee bit. I'm not going to put him quite into the Sugarly Peg Club, but
he's not going into the world famous David Simmons Sugarly Peg Club yet.
No, not yet. But he's going that way. But he's struggling to get results, and it's going to be a hard ask again on Monday, a week tonight. His next game against Celtic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, bad results happen. I mean, they happen. As we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that we said if Hibs could get a bit of consistency, they would challenge Celtic. But I argued at that point, and this is nothing against Hibs, but clubs of that size, you're not going to get consistency because you don't have the level of players, you don't have the level of management really either that is going to dictate a team that's going to win week after week after week. So poor performances are going to come. The good thing that you need to kind of try and do as a manager at Jack Ross's level is when those poor performances do come, you maybe try and scrape a draw. You maybe try and get a reasonable performance. And the last couple of performances from Hibs have not been good enough. And I think he's the first one to admit that. But I just think it's a bad time for him to get that sort of, because as we touched on, Aberdeen had gone through a little spell similar to this a couple of weeks ago where they had a few boys out injured and a few guys COVID-related stuff they'd been missing, and their performances and their results had kind of nosedived at that point. And I think if Hibs had managed to kind of maintain a bit of form and they would have put a lot of pressure on Aberdeen for that race for 3rd place. But yeah, it is a bit of a shame for Jack Ross, because I don't really think, looking at the team selection and the guys he's had on the bench, and without watching the game and sort of tactically analysing what went on, I don't see what he's done or what's caused the sort of collapse that's happened in the last 2 weeks just by looking at the team. The goalkeeping situation, which I know that you all obviously want to come on to, might have something to do with it. I don't know. Like, they're maybe used to having Marciano there, but I watched the young boy Barnes play against Rangers at Ibrox, and I thought he looked good. I thought he looked decent.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's what I was going to come on to, Stephen, talking about goalkeepers as well. Hibs were faced, if you don't know this already, Hibs were faced to change their goalkeeper before kick-off, like you said. Mascherano was meant to be starting, he got injured during the warm-up, so therefore Dylan Barnes had to go in goals, and the goalkeeping coach, Craig Sampson, was the second goalkeeper on the bench. Now, since Saturday's game, Dylan Barnes, he's been recalled by his parent club, QPR, to go back. So now, as it stands, Hibs have one fit goalkeeper and their goalkeeping coach, Craig Sampson. That is it. Anthony, who do you think they should maybe go out and try and sign? Do you have any thoughts on any goalkeepers that they might want to target?
Put me on the spot there.
Put you on the spot. Well, put it this way, to put a wee tongue-in-cheek sort of jib at it, Zamal has now been told by Hearts that he's free to leave the club. Do you think that would be a shock move to move from one club in Edinburgh to your rivals?
I've already said that if that was on the cards, I would quite happily give Bobby Zlamal a piggyback from Tynecastle to Easter Road if that was a possibility, because he's not the best.
I mean, watching it on Saturday, although Barnes was at fault for one of the goals, I think the defence didn't cover themselves in glory either. I mean, certainly the last goal with Hanlon and Porteous was really poor by their standards. They're two really good defenders who've generally been in brilliant form earlier in the season anyway, and they looked all over the place with that goal, particularly Porteous when the ball goes over his head, and he had two chances to clear it. Hanlon had one chance, and between the two of them, they should have made sure Robinson wasn't scoring that goal. So I mean, obviously the focus on the goalkeeping position is understandable in light of Barnes leaving. But Hibs will not have any problems there. I wouldn't have thought that Graham Massey will have a list of goalkeepers that are available or guys they could target and try and sign. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'm sure they'll have a plan up their sleeve. And they also have young Dabrowski who's out on loan. I don't know what the
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I was going to say, could they not recall him back? Yeah.
I'm sure they would be able to, but I don't know for certain. But if he was to come back, I don't think they'd have any worries about putting him in. He's played a few first team games before, and he's certainly highly regarded. He's got good mentality, and I don't think there would be any worries. Whether that's how Hibs view it, they want him to come in, and I mean, I don't know even what the Marciano situation is, whether he's got a chance of playing on Monday or not. But if Marciano isn't available, then Hibs will have a solution. I mean, I dare say they wouldn't want to go in with Craig Sampson, given that he's retired. But I wouldn't worry too much about them. Certainly in the longer term, they'll find a solution one way or another. But in terms of Jack Ross, I mean, you're talking about him there in the context of the race for third place that we're talking about. It's only 2 or 3 weeks ago we were talking about Jack Ross as a potential candidate to replace Neil Lennon as Celtic manager. And I'm not saying these last few results would suddenly change whether he's a good manager or a bad manager, but they certainly changed the narrative. And I don't think if Neil Lennon was to walk now, I don't think Jack Ross's name would necessarily be in the frame, whereas it would have been perhaps a few weeks ago. I mean, I saw after Saturday, there's people coming out saying, I know you get a lot of knee-jerk reactions on a match day on social media, but people comparing Jack Ross to Heckingbottom and calling for his head, saying he's not a good Hibs manager and stuff like that. That's just a minority. Most people, I think, would say that Jack Ross has generally done a pretty good job for Hibs. But this is the problem in football management now. Things can change so quickly. As I mentioned Heckingbottom there. There was a period where Hibs fans were singing his name week in, week out. Heckie's at the wheel and all that. A couple of bad results, and Heckie was an absolute dud, and he was run out of town within 3 months, 4 months of the new season starting. So things can turn very quickly. I mean, Stephen Robinson, I guess, is an example of how perceptions of a manager can change. A year ago, his stock was high. Hearts fans were saying, oh, why didn't we go for him instead of Stendhal, that sort of thing. And now he's out of job and having had a really bad 2020. I mean, it's just that football's a bonkers game at times in terms of analysing where a team is, where a manager is. It just changes so quickly, and sometimes there's no real rhyme or reason to it.
Yep. As you mentioned, the recruitment side at Hibs are going to be busy trying to source a goalkeeper for next Monday. They've already signed Chris Cadden, I believe. That's now across the line. Stephen, is that a good signing for Hibs?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it is actually confirmed yet.
I think it's almost done. I think it's almost a done deal.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good signing for them. Chris Cadden, he was a good player, a very good player at Motherwell a few years back. But I think he played. He tended to play kind of right wing for Motherwell and was very pacey, good on the ball. He then sort of moved on. He went to America and I think he signed for Columbus Crew, but it was a bit of a strange one because I think he signed for them and then was immediately loaned to Oxford United in England. So, but I think since then he's played predominantly at right back, which I don't know if that's really a position that, like, if Hibs see him as a right back or maybe cover as further forward. I just don't really know where they see him as playing. But I mean, there's absolutely no doubt he's 24 years old, so he's at a very good age. If they can get him tied on maybe a couple of year contract, it's worth a gamble to sort of see if he's going to kind of come into that team and improve. Like, I think I spoke a few weeks ago and sort of said that that Paul McGinn at right back was a good player, a decent sort of steady Eddie. But if you're looking to kind of push on and then maybe you needed to look somebody who's going to maybe got a bit more quality. After I said that, I think Paul McGinn scored 3 goals in 2 games or something after that. So But nah, I think Cadden's a good sign-in. It's one of these ones that, again, if you look at it from a sort of Hearts, Aberdeen, Hibs point of view, if any of those three teams had signed a guy like Chris Cadden, you'd be saying that's a good sign-in. So, yeah, I don't see where he's going to play as yet, but I do believe that wherever he does play, he'll be good.
Yep. Moving on, another game at the weekend that finished Killie 1, St Mirren 1. Now it wasn't a great game, it wasn't the best of games, not one that's going to be remembered for much football, but there was an instant, and I don't know if any's seen it yet, you can jump in if you did. After the 90 minutes, there's a cross that comes in, a cross sort of shot. 1-0 at the moment to Killie, so St Mirren firing the shot. Danny Rogers, the Killie goalkeeper, seems to get a hand on it, but takes 2 steps back and the ball crosses the line. Did any of you see that incident at all at the weekend?
No, I didn't.
If you have not seen this, anybody listening or watching the show, sorry, Google it. It is unbelievable.
And they crossed the line though, because Alex Dyer seemed pretty emphatic in terms of admitting it had crossed the line. But when you see it, it looks borderline.
Exactly, and this is where I'm going to come to with this one. We had it in the final, in the Scottish Cup final, the goal line technology, like we've touched on before, Scottish football maybe doesn't have the facility to roll out VAR. We've not got the financial security to do that, if you like. But we must have the funds to implement goal line technology. So you've got the Hawkeye, you've got the watch, it crosses the line, you get a little vibration, a little beep in your phone, on your watch, sorry, perfect, goal. And it's incidents like this where it would obviously pay its due. Do you think that's something that we should roll out in the Premier clubs in Scotland?
Yeah, I don't see that being a massive financial burden on the clubs, but I just think at this moment in time, David, it's clubs are scrambling for survival. Never mind anything else. So for the governing body to invest any money anywhere other than keeping teams alive, I think there's going to be an outcry. But yeah, I agree with you in principle. It's something that if the game. Imagine we don't implement that for the next couple of years, and when COVID is eventually away and we kind of return back to normal, you look down south and England's got multi-camera VAR. You've got all these different sort of and we're still trying to see, like a linesman's trying to bend round to see if the ball's crossed the line and things like that. It would be maybe a bit laughable, but I kind of like that. I kind of like
the rawness.
Just as an aside, you touch on the financial situation there. I was thinking the other day, I find it astonishing that a Scottish club, obviously you don't want it to happen, but I find it astonishing that no Scottish club has actually hit
I think the government bailout saved some, like teams like Morton and things. Like I think the sort of 500 grand a team in the Championship, that's kept Morton alive for at least another couple of months until they kind of see. But yeah, I agree with you. Like how any league, like teams in League Two and League One haven't gone out of business yet is testament to the guys that are running these clubs, because I think they all need to. If it gets to the end of the season and every club survived, then they all need to take a massive step back and applaud and take the applause, because I think I did not see that all teams would survive this season. Like I just didn't think that would even be close to a possibility.
4 or 5 months to go the season. That's the problem, and you're now looking at literally almost a full season. I would dare say it probably will be a full season with no fans in the ground, bar the odd 100 here and there that we had earlier in the season on the sort of trial runs. I mean, if you'd said to me a year ago, Scottish football fans will not be in football stadiums for a whole season and no club will go under, you'd be like, how can that happen? So hopefully every club can find a way through, because it's getting to a pretty worrying stage now.
Exactly, and obviously the news that came out this afternoon as well about us going back into lockdown after midnight tonight. What impact, I mean, I'm just wondering if any of you know this, it might not be the case, but will Scottish football still continue, or will that be shut up until the start of February?
Nah, it'll continue. Professional sport is being given an exemption. So until the... Obviously, they've been given an exemption because you've got the team that's 19 points behind in the Championship have just flown off to Dubai, despite the fact that you, me, Tony, anyone else isn't allowed to travel to East Kilbride, never mind Dubai. So...
Yeah,
part
so
of
that's
the problem
going to...
you've got here is, so the Scottish Cup games, for instance, this weekend, you're going to have part-time players who don't get tested coming up against Hearts players, Dundee players in the Scottish Cup. I saw that
Hearts had reinstated their COVID testing again, because obviously they're under no I don't think any team below the SPL has to COVID test their players. But Hearts have now had 2 positive cases in the last 2 weeks, so they've gone back to testing to kind of obviously protect everyone in and around the club. So, but not every club's going to have the financial clout that Hearts have got to be able to afford to do that. So it is worrying times, I have to say.
Yeah, we need to move on because I'm quite aware of the time. But it finished up in Ross County at Dingwall. It was Ross County 1, St Johnstone 1. So Yogi Hughes, he gets another point on the board. He would have been a great contender for the job at Fir Park. He's went in at Dingwall. Ross County's hopefully getting them back on side. Do you think he can save them from relegation?
Yes. Let's move on. Let's talk about Hearts.
Anthony,
Yogi Hughes managing every team in the league.
Well, he's a friend. It finished 1-1. Ross Draper took the lead for Ross County after 5 minutes later. Craig Conway equalised from the penalty spot as well. It also finished Aberdeen 0, Dundee United 0. Not a great game to write home about. But here's one for you, because we've been talking about goalkeepers. The Dundee United goalkeeper, he's a player.
Aye. I think if I was Celtic, I'd go and try and get him.
Exactly. I've got all my notes.
Every time I've seen him, Benjamin Seacrest, I think he looks incredible. I remember him coming through at Villa, and he was one of these guys that you always get in kind of top level football in England that gets loaned out about 15 times to different clubs, and I was quite surprised when he turned up at Dundee United. But he looks like a bit of a gem, to be honest. Every time I've seen him, he looks great.
Yep, I would recommend him to any club. There we go. What a player. He's a great goalkeeper. Superb. Right, let's move on to the one that you're dying to talk about, Stephen. It finished Dundee 3, Hearts 1. And since you're dying to talk about it, let's go to Anthony. Anthony, Dundee came out absolutely flying for the very first minute. Is that maybe how they went on and got the victory? Are other teams showing Hearts too much respect at times, and Hearts are used to that? And Dundee, they came out for the very first minute. They were absolutely flying.
I think Dundee did pretty much what Dunfermline did 6 weeks previously in East End Park. It was a very similar game, and even before Dundee scored, I was thinking the same. I was thinking this Hearts can't get out here. Like they're camped in. They don't look like they're going to. I mean, obviously a game can change very quickly, but you just thought if this keeps going the way it's going, there's only going to be one team scoring the goal, and it'll be Dundee, because Hearts looked like they were just treading water, just trying to. Not that they were under relentless siege, but they just didn't look capable of asserting themselves in the game, and that was the way it was pretty much till half time. Dundee on the front foot, playing with intensity. Hearts just trying to hold them back and not really doing very well. It was exactly the same in the game at Dunfermline early in the season, and there's certainly even games that Hearts have won, when they won at Arbroath earlier in the season and the cup game at Alloa. They seem to have a real problem with away games against teams they should be expected to beat, or that they would ordinarily hope to win. They're just not. I don't know if it's the opposition are more fired up and playing with higher intensity than they tend to do on a week-to-week basis, and Hearts are getting caught cold by it. But I mean, Hearts should be wise to the fact that teams are going to come at them and get in their faces and try and make it uncomfortable for them, but they just don't seem to have an answer at the moment. I mean, obviously the lack of width is an issue for them in terms of the 3 wingers they signed in the summer. None of them have been able to play regularly for one reason or another. 2 of them have struggled for form, Freer and Roberts, and Ginelli's been in and out because of injury and illness. So they've got the guts of a good team there. I think everybody would acknowledge that, but they're obviously missing that bit of spark, especially when Ginelli's not on the pitch. And obviously there was, without Ginelli, Boyce and Smith on Saturday night there, but they should still have a team capable of causing Dundee more problems than they did. But people will say it's the manager that sets them out that way. I'm not so sure it is. I think sometimes games just evolve in a certain way, and there's nothing a manager can do to change that. In a sense, if Dundee start fired up and win the first tackle and start turning Hearts with balls over the top, balls in behind, it's very hard to get out of that rut. And sometimes it just, there's no real explanation for it, but it can happen. And Hearts are really struggling with these away games, and they need to find some way of dealing with them a little bit better than they are at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen.
I've seen this argument. I've seen this argument loads of times with people saying, "Oh, well, when Hearts don't have the wingers that Robbie's obviously went in." It was the first thing he did when he got made Hearts manager, was he wanted width, he wanted pace, and because he obviously identified that as being the weak point of the squad. But at the end of the day, as Tony's quite rightly said, we've been missing, like Ginelli has been missing pretty much out with the final for the last couple of months. the other two, Roberts and Freer, are miles off it. So like they're not even getting quoted at the moment. But we've still been scoring loads of goals. They've still been scoring plenty of goals when they've needed to. They've still been getting decent results. But to me, and I know this, like, I saw your tweet on Saturday evening as well, Tony. So I know you're not going to agree with this, but I think defensively, Hearts are so poor. The centre half. Like, I think Hearts have a single centre half at the club at the moment that I would be confident having in the Premier League. I don't rate Halkett. I think Christoph Berra was finished 18 months ago and should not be anywhere near a Hearts side. Chris Hamilton, I haven't seen enough of to judge. Popescu does not look anywhere near it, because if he was, Christoph Berra wouldn't be playing at this moment in time. I just don't see it. Like, Christoph Berra, I think, is sometimes, and I agree with what you had said in your tweet about being unfairly picked out for that. If you look at that specific game, the first goal's not his fault. The second goal's not his fault. Third goal is his fault. But I just think his general play.
Tweet that one. I was cursing when that happened.
Exactly. You put the tweet out and bang, he pulls the boy down in the box. But I just think, see the things that Christoph Berra used to be good at. Like he's never been a defender that gets the ball and sprays passes and does all these things. But the things he used to be good at, he was solid in the tackle, like good at heading, strong, doesn't get beat physically. Those things are things that he's now. These are happening to him. I would argue with anybody that what is Christoph Berra good at now? I just don't. I don't think he's good enough to be playing at this level. And this is the Championship in Scotland. And this might sound ridiculous. I just do not think he's at that level.
He was good for Dundee in the first half of the year, and he's been part of a Hearts team that's top of the league. So I think that argument. I take your point about the Premiership. By all means, I think they would certainly be looking to upgrade on what they've got for the Premiership. But I think they'll win the league comfortably. Even with that, to me, that's not good enough. Like I would really hope that behind the scenes, Robbie Nielsen and the coaching staff and Joe Savage now is his job to do it. Needs to be saying, right, well, at the end of the season, we just let these guys go, because they are nowhere near it. They are nowhere near at a level. I think they probably envisaged that they could have had Popescu and Halkett would have got them through until Suter got back and Berra was there if they needed them. But the situation's obviously evolved whereby Popescu's not quite lived up to expectations of the management team anyway. And they've thought, Christoph Berra, we know he might not be exactly what we want, but he's going to get us through this season. And Berra will give the ball away. He'll make, like he had that terrible pass out to Walker on the left that nearly cost a goal. But in terms of actually just doing the basics, clearing these lines, I still think he's fine generally. He's obviously
the way that Nielsen wants Hearts to play, though, it's just it goes back to almost what Craig Levein, like. See when you watch that game, it was like watching a Craig Levein's Hearts team, and that for me comes down to Berra playing, because Berra gets the ball and his first instinct isn't to find feet of Herring, which is what Herring's there to do. Herring's sitting in that gap to get the ball, spin, and then start the play. But his first instinct isn't to do that. His first instinct is to look 45 yards further up the park for a diagonal. And when that's not on, he then maybe goes and plays. Like I just do not think. I think the guy's been a great servant for the club, and I really rated him as a player. But I just think now he's just nowhere near the level that we should.
I take all those points, but I don't think you can blame that on the way Hearts played on Saturday, because they played exactly the same way when Popescu, who's a ball player, was in the team at Dunfermline. So I don't think I take your point that Berra may or may not be good. I understand your argument, but to say that that's the reason that Hearts didn't play well on Friday, I think it was a complete off night from every single outfield player, to be honest, apart from maybe Brandon.
He was a contributing factor, but it wasn't just him that made the result. Yeah.
Right. Let me jump in between you two.
On the wingers.
On you go.
Well, about Roberts and Freer there. I was thinking Sam Nicholson. Obviously, Hearts had him in for talks in the summer.
Yeah,
he's now flying at Bristol Rovers. I know Bristol Rovers are not a particularly high level in the grand scheme.
I think he scored at the weekend.
Yeah,
he scored a volley. It was a cracker.
Nicholson would have signed for Hearts, but basically they couldn't afford. He wasn't asking for completely outlandish money. He would have signed for Hearts if they'd just given him whatever he was asking for. I dare say that would have been less than what Freer and Roberts are on combined. I think had they just gone for that. So, I mean, I can't remember the exact chronology of when Nicholson was in for talks for Hearts, whether Freer and Roberts had already signed. But I think it's safe to say if you'd signed one Sam Nicholson instead of two Freer and Roberts, you'd have been in a better place from a Hearts perspective.
100%. I had that same conversation yesterday. That especially, like, obviously I know Sam loosely because he's from Pennycook, same town as I am, and he's just, him and his girlfriend have just announced that they're having a baby as well. So obviously being closer to home would have fitted perfectly into his lifestyle. So it was to me an absolute no-brainer to get him back, and especially given the fact we would have been in the Championship, he could have got himself up to a level. And I still think that there's a player in Sam Nicholson. I still think he'll kick on from where he is now. So I think it is one of these ones that got away, to be honest.
Yeah, I've had a comment on the screen for a while. It's Lee 1874. He's put, Hearts are carrying far too many passengers in that squad. They're about to offload Bobby Zamal, the goalkeeper, as well. He's been told that he's free to move on to pastures new if he can find a club. And I think you guys have kind of covered everybody else who maybe Lee's mentioning as passengers in the club. One thing that's been rumoured today that I've noticed in the Hearts Hibs situation is that both of them are keeping a close eye on Eamon Brophy's situation at Kilmarnock. Anthony, would he be a good signing for either Hearts or Hibs?
I'm not going to say would or wouldn't, but Hearts have signed enough good strikers over the years who come with a decent pedigree from other Scottish clubs, and they're complete flops when they come to Hearts, or Hearts just can't get the best out of them. So Brophy's not one I would be convinced that would. That's no slight on the player himself. It's just the fact that so many reputable strikers have come to Hearts and struggled. I mean, even Liam Boyce, who they're paying massive amount of money to, and came with a really high pedigree. It's only in the last month or so that he's really started to convince people that he's a striker of substance. It was 6 weeks ago people were asking questions of Boyce, and if you get a striker of that calibre who's struggling to live up to expectations, then somebody like Brophy is going to have to score 20 goals a season to live up to expectations. I don't know what it is, but just Hearts really seem to struggle to get good centre forwards. It's been a problem for the last 2 decades, really. And so I wouldn't hang my hat on any striker that they signed to do well. That's no slight on Eamon Brophy.
Yeah. Would you take him in your Hearts team, Stephen?
No.
On the same basis as Anthony?
No. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I just don't think... Eamon Brophy's a guy who I was absolutely flabbergasted that he actually got to the level he did. Like, he got a cap for Scotland and did really well for Killie, but I think that was a lot down to Steve Clarke. I think Steve Clarke worked really closely with him, and he was a kid who got released by Hamilton, and I think everyone just expected to see him playing for an Albion Rovers or a Dumbarton in the kind of lower leagues, and Killie took a bit of a gamble on him, and he did well for a period. But I mean, Killie haven't exactly been ripping up trees this season, and he can't get a game for them. So I'm not saying that Hearts should be looking at that, but I just don't know. If he's coming in as a sort of cover for striker, then maybe he's a good, reliable guy that I think would potentially score a few goals in the Championship, and it could be one of these ones where, like, look at Loris Shankland. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he could come and just all of a sudden, bang, something fires in him, and he could set fire. But as Anthony quite rightly said, from years of watching Hearts, I can guarantee you we could sign Ruud van Nistelrooy in his pump, and he would have scored 3 goals for us in 92 appearances. It's just...
No, well, let's move on and have a look at the fixtures that's coming up. But before we do that, there was a story that broke this afternoon. Like we say, we cover all things Scottish football. Ex-Scotland captain Darren Fletcher, he's joined Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's backroom squad. He's now going to be a first-team coach at Man United. Stephen, that's a great move for him, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. Obviously, it's just one of these ones where it's just works, isn't it? It's just a perfect kind of match, because I think a lot of people see Darren Fletcher, like they watch him when he's doing his punditry, and I think it's quite widely, he's kind of in the same boat as Sean Maloney, where a lot of people talk about how good a coach he is and how good a thinker he is about the game, and I think if he had gone somewhere else, if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Michael Carrick, who obviously have personal relationships with him, if he had ended up going somewhere else as let's say a number 2 or a first team coach, you would have maybe looked at that and thought, that's a bit maybe something that we... So it's good. I think Man United, given what's gone on there the last few years, that obviously getting Solskjaer in that first place was they were making a conscious effort to try and change the ethos and the way that the club was running, to get back to kind of the old school the Fergie way sort of thing. And I think bringing Darren Fletcher in is only going to improve that, because I think it's widely regarded that he was considered as Alex Ferguson's son for the entire time that he was there. So, good on Fletcher. I hope it really works out for him.
Definitely. I mean, Anthony, it's refreshing, like what Stephen says, to see Scottish boys like Sean Maloney and Darren Fletcher like coaching at that sort of level, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there was any doubt that Darren Fletcher was going to go on and do something pretty good and coach it, or get himself at a good level in the coaching game. He's a very articulate guy, very intelligent guy, and he's clearly got the respect of everybody in the sort of football world, and particularly at Man United. So I think it's he's the sort of guy who can, to an extent, pick what sort of job he goes into, because he's got such a good reputation in the game. And yeah, I always like to see local guys doing well. Another Midlothian boy like ourselves, just down the road. So, fantastic.
We wish him all the best. Looking ahead to the weekend's action on Saturday, Dundee United host St Johnstone, Kilmarnock at Rugby Park against Hamilton Accies, Livingston host Ross County, and it's St Mirren against Motherwell. As one you mentioned as well, it's also Scottish Cup weekend. I'm not going to rattle through all those, but there is a few tasty ties as Dundee host Bonnyrigg Rose. That one's getting aired on the TV. That'll be a good game, won't it? It could be a wee shock there for the minnows, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, there's that, and obviously Hearts are still waiting to see who they're going to play, whether it be, am I right in saying, Camelin or Brora Rangers?
Yeah, I think so.
It's gone off again. It's supposed to be played tonight, but it's been postponed. So whether
how is that going to work then? If they can't get that tie, I take it it just gets delayed.
Yeah, tie would just get held up until they can actually play it. So.
Yeah, no, there's a few tasty ties. Like you say, we've got like say Keith against Clyde, Kelty Hearts Stranraer, Greenock and Dunfermline. They're playing against each other as well. Partick Thistle, Cowden Beef, Bucky Thistle and Inverness Cally. That's going to be a good game in the Highlands. But what to do is obviously join us same time next week, and we'll discuss it all again then on the Play On podcast. On behalf of Stephen Commons, Anthony Brown and myself, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week on the Play On podcast.